Hello everybody. Welcome back to my TED Talk. Gonna be real with you here. This chapter was a real slog to get through.
I need to.
I don't know. It's just like I was struggling to motivate myself.
Please.
Not struggling to like make the video. I still enjoyed making the video, but just like this particular chapter was so sleep. Alright, anyway, I fully expect that even if you saw that, to show up to this one confused, because that's just the kind of chapter it was. Okay, so super simple run through speed run. Nanami woke up Han Ying, and then, Han Ying spent a little time in the church, but she decided that she didn't want to join the church officially until she finished up her business in Kowloon, which was just like reuniting with Pulau. So she goes over to Kowloon. Everything plays out normally after there. She gets attacked by machines. She goes to try and break into the Niter. She meets with Chao Feng, and then she goes up into the mountains. Then they end up in the mountains, and her and Spooner are trapped by Cradle's like virtual reality space. Cradle is an organization. Well, this Cradle is an organization that Yin paid to try and assassinate Chu. And then Villiers got mad and destroyed the organization. And then what was left of them infiltrated their way onto the Niter and hacked into Han Ying and tried to use her to assassinate Villiers. Alright, so there's a little bit of background context on Cradle. Alright, so Han Ying and Spooner, they're on the mountain. They're lost in this VR space. And they meet this old guy named Miku. And Miku is supposed to be this like amalgamation of the consciousnesses, or like the data, right? The memory data of all the people that are stuck in this dreamland. Because Cradle essentially sacrificed everyone who was on the mountain, who was living on the mountain, and uploaded them into their dream simulation because they were trying to create another version of Akasha, which is, of course, the memory data of all the Kowloon citizens. So I ended up having to read this chapter, like reread this chapter, at least a dozen times. And I complained for like a week straight because they're so convoluted in the way they word things. Nothing is clear. It's just a bunch of metaphors and stuff, right? Like one that comes to mind is Miku's talking about the name of the mountain. We're like, we don't care about the name of the mountain. You're right, because we're not talking about the mountain. The mountain is Han Ying. So they're saying that, so he was trying to say that no matter what's on the outside, that doesn't matter. It's what's on the inside that truly counts. Which is part of Han Ying's like ongoing struggle in the chapter of wanting to know what like a heart is. Because like Nanami was, when Nanami woke her up, she was in the dream saying that, you've awoken to having a heart, right? And Arcana was saying that you've awoken to having a heart. But she's like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that is. So she was trying to find out like what that actually meant. Because as far as Han Ying is concerned, how can she know that she's developing her own sense of self and like her own independent thought without knowing what exactly that is? Which I guess that, Han Ying's struggle, like that struggle was supposed to be the main conflict of the chapter, but they definitely spent too much time going back to Han Ying being sad about, oh, I don't want to be a tool to kill people anymore, right? Because she was guilty about that for like half the chapter, right? Because after she found out that the people, the robots on the mountain were like actually the uploaded memory data of the people, she went spiraling down again, right? Like PTSD. It sent her right back to that day on the Niter, which I personally, look, this might just be me, but I don't understand it because no one ever blamed her for it in the first place, right? She knows it wasn't her fault. Everyone who was on the Kowloon crew did their investigation and found out that it wasn't her fault. Pulau doesn't think it's her fault. So this is a non-issue. Why do we keep revisiting how she feels about trying to kill Villiers that one time? But I digress. The entire chapter felt extremely disjointed. Like it feels like things were kind of just stitched in there, right? Like they didn't, like nothing was really bridged well. And you know exactly where I'm going with this. Fu Shen came out of absolute nowhere. Right, you're just going up the mountain, and right before you get to the end, the old guy is just like, "Oh, by the way, I need you to kill Fu Shen for me. He's up on the top of the mountain tripping." Like, come on, man. We couldn't have set that up like a little bit better. All right, but then you get up there, you beat Fu Shen, and there's this like subplot about Spooner, who is even on the mountain in the first place because he's looking for an old friend that like saved him back when he first escaped his like captors. Surprise, surprise! Once again, out of left field, Fu Shen is that same guy who saved Spooner all those years ago. Spooner didn't even recognize him. As he's dying, he's just like, "Oh my God, Spooner! I recognize you. I'm Ulysses. I'm that guy that saved you all those years ago." And we're sitting there like, yes, top tier writing. Thank you. Who knows? Maybe it's just me, or maybe I was just like spoiled by Spiral of Chronos. And now everything just looks worse. Everything just looks worse in comparison. I don't know. It could just be me. Alright, so some stuff I ended up cutting was, there were a couple of Pulau sections that I cut. It was just gameplay, where you would just play as Pulau as she was going up the mountain. I cut a couple of Chu sections. Most of them were flashbacks. All those really did is explain, in another area, what Cradle was. Particularly, there was one that was a little interesting. It was just really short, so I didn't put it in there. But Chu met with this guy named Richard, and he was a former member of Cradle. And he gave her like a file on all of Cradle's, information, past and present. So I'm thinking that maybe, he gave that file to Chu, and Chu gave that file to Du Hang. And that's the file that Du Hang was talking about when she was speaking with Chao Fang. Because she did mention that she said her sources were from within Kowloon. Food for thought, I guess. And then, sticking with Du Hang, at the end of the chapter, she goes up to their base and she finds their like Huashu Akasha prototype, and she ends up downloading everything, and she's speaking to, her mysterious stranger, who will be a little bit more important later. And Du Hang is not Du Hang. So apparently, Du Hang was her husband's name, and he died like back during the defense of Kowloon. And she just ended up taking his name, and Chu told her to stay on Babylonia, I guess so she could have like an insider person. And then lastly, Yin, of course, is back. So now we know he's kicking still, which I'm not too surprised about. Like, his sprite looks the same, so I'm thinking he might also be a construct. I mean, that wouldn't be too surprising, considering, his other two siblings were also constructs. Because if not, that'd make him like, what, 80 or something? Like, overall, the chapter is, kind of to me. Which makes me kind of sad, because I'm a huge Kowloon shill. I really like Kowloon. But every time they show up, it's kind of just like, Right? Like, Lost Chapter was good. Chapter 12 was good. Well, I can't even give them Chapter 12, really, because it wasn't about Kowloon. It was just a war that took place in Kowloon. But, you know what? For argument's sake, I'll give them Chapter 12. Reveries with a Whale, the Pulau chapter. That was a skip. And then, most recently, is this one, which I would have skipped, but it had just enough information that I was like, no, I have to do it. It introduces Han Ying, and I don't think Han Ying is very prominent until we get to Polaris. She's not even really that prominent in Polaris. It's just something happens to her in Polaris that explains what happens to her in Soaring Beyond in her chapter. So if I didn't introduce her now, I'd have to explain who Han Ying is like 7 videos from now. Explain her like 5-second cameo. So then it would make sense why she has a whole chapter. But more important than that is probably, Du Hang. That's probably the more important part. Like I said, just enough that I actually had to do the chapter. Because I was like, man, the only 2 chapters that I wanted to skip, and they're both centered around Kowloon characters. Sad. But yeah, definitely, if anybody has any thoughts or corrections, do not be shy. You can put those down in the comments. Right? If anyone is feeling like, I think I know this better than you right now, go ahead and say it. Because if there's any chapter where you all probably do know a bit better, it's this one. But now we can get back to the main story chapters, so I'm super hyped. Time to see what the dogs have been up to. Anyway, I don't know how to end videos, so bye.